all right. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. And I'm so glad that you all are enjoying your time, which was the goal. So we are getting started a little late, which means we're probably going to end a little bit late. But I wanted to let people mingle because this is a different kind of town hall than we have previously had. But it is a party town hall. Hopefully you'll learn something too. I'm just testing the clicker, which I should have tested. My name's Daniela Velasquez, and I'm the Alderwoman for the 6th Ward. And tonight you're here for a special town hall. I was an Eisenhower Fellow this past year, which most of you know. So we're bringing together a different group of folks tonight. So if I could just get a raise of the hand if you were here because you were connected with the Eisenhower Fellows program. A little louder than that, come on. And as many of you know, I was on fellowship in both Germany and Colombia. So if you are here because of connection with the St. Louis Stuttgart Sister Cities organization, a little louder. And or a fan of Germanphile, that's great. If you are a member of the St. Louis Columbian Society, all right, so I want to just say thanks to my co-hosts for St. Louis Eisenhower Fellows, the St. Louis Stuttgart Sister Cities Organization, and the St. Louis Columbian Society for agreeing to say yes when I said, hey, I think I want to bring you all together and maybe have some food and maybe have some conversation and do it in my ward. How does that sound? So I just want to say thank you to you all for being a part of this. So this isn't going to be kind of a typical town hall. If you have questions about more ward-specific things, and I know actually I should give it a shout out. Do I have 6th Ward residents? All right. I am happy to answer your questions about snow removal, salt, potholes, all the good stuff. But if we could just leave that till afterwards so we can get through tonight's program. So I think, Madeline, can we click through? Oh, okay, never mind, that was me. So I'm just gonna give a little update about what Eisenhower is and why we're here. And also, I do wanna give a shout out to my co-host, which will be coming on a little bit after I talk about Colombia, but my fellow Ryan McClure. We changed around the program a little tonight because Ryan had an important meeting with the governor in Jefferson City at 4:30 about the Millennium Hotel, and of course I could not tell him no. But I'm so grateful that he came here and came literally straight from Jefferson City to be here tonight to talk to all of us. So we'll share about our fellowship experience together because we actually were able to not only both go to Germany, but we were both able to be in Germany together at the same time. But a little bit about the Eisenhower program, and there are former fellows here who can answer more questions, but I wanted to share a few quotes tonight from President Eisenhower. So the fellowship program was started by the friends and family of President Eisenhower because he thought if we talk to people in different places that we might be able to achieve a more just society and a more peaceful society through dialogue. So that is a simplified version, but the heart of what the Eisenhower Fellowship is all about. So it's really a chance, and the fellows in the room can attest. We have people who went to India, Singapore, all sorts of places across the world who can, I think, share that just talking to people from different areas of the world can really change your perspective on both life, but also what life is back at home. Sorry. All right, so Colombia. So I'm going to just start about my program in Colombia. So I went to 3 different cities in Colombia. I actually did my fellowship straight through. So I started in Germany, and then I went to Colombia. I went to Bogota for a night, then I went to Cartagena for a few days, then I flew to Medellin, then I flew to Bogota. Yes, and then I flew back home. And I was gone for a total of 35 days. Usually the fellowship is between 4 to 5 weeks, and I decided to not come home the first few days before Thanksgiving weekend and just stay the whole 35 days. So my fellowship focus was exploring open government models and digital engagement strategies. And really my long-term goal is to pursue St. Louis's participation entrance into something called the Open Government Partnership Local Program. So I'm going to talk about broadly about things. I'm not going to talk too much about the program tonight, but if you are interested, is anybody interested in making government more transparent? Okay, accessible, inclusive. Okay, yay, this is why I love this word. So those are all the things I really went to go learn about and study from people who were doing it. It's one thing, obviously, you know, just to read something, but a big part of this fellowship is really placing the theoretical into the practical, and not just what you read on paper, but what actually works and what doesn't. So I went and I met with people to talk about different ways to make our government more, all of these things, in hopes that, and hopefully with your help, because I'll need your help, that St. Louis can join Open Government Partnership Local. So as you see, it was a busy 35 days. I took 10 flights, 9 trains, had 47 meetings in the 35 days. That's not counting the jet lag and all the other good things and all the things I ate, which was one of my favorite questions when I got back was, what was your favorite food? That's not on this deck. So I'm gonna just talk about a few things that some of my bigger takeaways from Colombia. One about really their youth engagement and democracy starting young, and I'll talk about it a little bit in Germany too, but this was kind of one of the interesting parallels that I found, is that there's so much emphasis on how to get youth engaged in the democratic process, and there are structures to do that in both very different places. I also want to talk a little bit about how memory shapes participation, and one of the things that I most admire about Colombians is both their hope and resilience. Some of these people and some of these cities have been through a lot, and it also shapes their experiences, shape their perspective on how they engage with government, what they believe about democracy, if it's safe to do that. And I think some of that can shed light about what's kind of currently happening in our time right here in the U.S. And finally, do I have any Tower Grove South people? All right, yes. Any fans of McDonald Park? So one of the things that McDonald Dog Park, you were right. So one of the things that we'll talk about, but that was really interesting to learn, is that Colombia is one of the leaders in the participatory budgeting process, which is the reason why we have a dog park in McDonald Park, thanks to my predecessor, then 15th Ward Alderwoman Megan Green. So one of the things that became really apparent in Colombia was not only that people to have this idea of engagement. I'm actually just going to take this mic. But really their idea of youth council. So I mentioned I went to Medellin, and one of the things, so let me back up. All the cities I went to in Colombia are all a part of this Open Government Partnership Local program. And so what that program does is the city basically agrees to become a member, and then there's a creation of an action plan. And that action plan is co-created with stakeholders, so stakeholders being you, the public, stakeholders being what a lot of people call civil society, but what we might call nonprofits, and members of the community in co-creation with the government, usually through a methodological process, there we go, usually watched by some kind of academic organization, whether it's a community college or a university, that says that monitors and tracks what that engagement looks like. And so for each city, so countries have action plans, so both Germany and Colombia are both member countries of this Open Government Partnership, which has a country level membership program, but then cities are members too. So all the cities I went to in Colombia are all members, and one of the most thing that kept coming up was youth and how to engage young people. And so particularly in Medellin was where we really talked about it. So Medellin, it's a much bigger city than St. Louis, but they have 400 youth clubs, just clubs already, that the city helps facilitate these things, and its goal for its open government partnership action plan is to increase that to 800. Right? So not only are they trying to get young people involved in government, but they're trying to do it by finding ways to get them involved in things that they already like. The other really interesting thing is all of these cities that I went to in Colombia have youth councils. And we have a youth council too, and I'll share a little bit more about that. But their youth councils are they actually have elections for them, like real elections. They have to go somewhere and vote, and their youth council members are elected by the young people in those communities. And they have a national election day just for their youth council. And actually, they don't. What's interesting is in Germany, and I'll talk a little bit about Stuttgart, because I actually got to meet some of the members of that council, of the Stuttgart Youth Council. But in Medellin, it's a big part of what they're trying to do. I mean, there's a lot of things that that make that democracy can be better once we engage young people. And one of the things that I learned to think about on this trip was somebody once said to me, well, democracy is kind of like an operating system. So I have an iPhone. My partner, we have one of those mixed households. He is an Android. But the point is, I know how to work my OS and he knows how to work his. And it's sort of like that idea for democracy, right? If we don't understand how to use it, if we don't understand how it works and how can we use it and what happens when we don't. So one of the underlying themes of getting young people engaged is teaching them really like what democracy is and how to use it, so they know how to use it and really so we don't lose it. So that's kind of one of the fundamental kind of parts of why it's been such a big deal or such a focus for Colombia. And I would say a little bit more, a little bit different, but for Colombia in particular, a lot of where they're trying to build out their youth councils and youth activities are in these cities, not so much like Medellin, but some of these cities that might be at more security risks. I mean, you've kind of heard the different, you may have heard about, kind of the different things going on, but whether there might be gang activity or guerrilla activity or paramilitary activity, but basically where there's higher security risks, a lot of nonprofits are investing in building out youth councils and youth activities there specifically so those young people don't get recruited by any of these non-governmental groups that are in the community, but also so that they really learn what democracy is and sort of a long-term strategy to make sure that the country stays democratic, and they're really proud of that. So this is just a picture of, this is in Bogota. I got to one of my, and I promise it's not all travel pictures, but I had to put a few in here. This is with one of the council members for Bogota. He was the youngest councilman ever. I see a question real quick.
Yeah. It's a question about democracy.
Democracy or
democracy. So what is the percentage of young people under 18? To get a sense, because we know that Europe has the same problem we do. In other words, we are reproducing below full reproduction rate. So I wanted to know about
So the question is, what are the demographics? What's the percentage of young people, percentage under 18? I don't know it off the top of my head. I feel like it's 40-ish%, but I need to double check. But it's significant. I think it's different than Europe. But I will check and I'll find out for you. So this is Councilmember Julian Sastoque. He was one of the he was the youngest elected member of the Bogota City Council. Bogota is a little bit complicated, so I'm not going to get too into it. But it's kind of like D.C., even though it actually says D.C. It's a district, so it has basically a city level government. And then they have sort of assemblies, which are more of like it's like a borough too. So he's for the Bogota City Council, but they have basically assembly members that are part of the borough. But he was given an award recently by the UN for his work. He has created a civic engagement program to connect young people and also people who may not be typically in government to get involved and to learn. And so he was really incredible to meet with and talk to. So I just want to share a picture of him. And so another thing I wanted to talk about was how memory shapes participation. And so one of the groups that I visited that really expanded my mind was a group called Medellin, Todos por Medellin, which means all for Medellin. And this group, and this is my little, sorry, this thing is kind of slow. That's the fun group picture. But they are this group they work closely with the government. They work closely with the government of Medellin in developing their action plan. But more specifically, they have this organization that is part behavioral choice. So they have this organization that basically takes behavioral, like consumer behavioral methodology and applies it to politics. They've created also, if there are any marketers in the room or any folks who do like basically building out psychographics of people, like what they really have drilled down into why people are choosing to engage in the political system with the way they do with a fully backed behavioral science methodology. And I was like, whoa. And I can't even describe it, but what they've done, and they merged that with a couple of other things. They also use this information to create what some of in the activist world might say are called actions, but like, you know, art installations or actions designed to bring attention to specific issues in the community. And they also, in addition to that, they also run a hotline for reporting corruption. So they do all of this because corruption and transparency go hand in hand. And so one of the things if I can go back on my slide over here that I wanted to talk about is this whole idea of experience influencing trust. And particularly in Medellin and in places in Colombia where there have been higher rates of corruption in government, what these organizations like this one and in Cartagena and in Bogota are doing, they're actually tracking how where public projects are and how and if the project is done, to track if that money is spent. And so I know that those are a lot of questions that I get asked here on a regular basis. Where's this project? How much has, you can talk about tornado recovery. Those are things that we get asked about in government a lot. But a lot of the focus is trying to track information and track what's happening in a project to see if that project is actually getting done. And then what happens when it doesn't. And I'm just going to be honest here, it is a little bit different. Sometimes people might resign, but there's a lack of prosecution when there is corruption. And what I want to share is that the experience really guides how people choose to engage with democracy. And so this is what they're studying. So they're studying, okay, well, and it's similar if you think about it. I mean, one of the things that I thought was interesting because, sorry, I'm going to tell it to a crowd like it is, but they're like, when I went to Colombia, and they're like, well, why are you so interested in transparency? And I'm like, well, let me tell you about kind of all the things that have happened in St. Louis. And then all kind of the relationship, and there's and across the region about people going to prison on corruption charges and things like that. And then they were kind of like, oh, so you understand. And then people opened up, and and they opened up even more, because what it does, and I think what we see here, and I think you can watch any of the committee meeting hearings, and you can see that because people don't necessarily trust, they might think that government is more or less corrupt, whether it is or it's not, they tend to engage less with government, right? So that is one thing. So how do you then get people to want to be involved in a process when they don't think anything's going to change, which is what, giving you an example, Medellin, and in these cities I talked to in Colombia, where that's happened, and then seeing, frankly, and I think I don't have the numbers for the rates of prosecution, but some cities have been a little bit more aggressive or more proactive in prosecuting than others, but there is still a feeling that, well, if I do something, it's not going to make a difference, right? Which is not that unlike what people in the U.S. feel. I dare to say people in St. Louis feel. We don't want them to feel like that, but that exists. So then what can we do, right? And that's kind of that memory shaping the participation. And so the trust, trust influences if people are going to engage in what they're willing to, how much time, effort, what they're willing to put on the line to engage. And I think that there are some lessons that we can, learn from what they're doing here, because there are some similarities here and across the U.S. I'm just gonna.
I think I get it, but I'm just trying to get the clarification of the use of memory. Like, are you talking about memory, people's memories of their specific experience with government, municipal government? Are you talking about a larger cultural memory, say, of like St. Louis's history of racism, a systemic issue? I know that those things can be intertwined, but are you looking at the larger picture, or is this really specifically about people's relationship with government, the memory?
So I'm just going to, for all the folks and the folks online, so your question is when I talk about memory, is it specific related to municipal government, or is it specifically related to larger issues and themes where they live? Cultural memory.
Like larger cultural issues, or is it my memory of dealing with my local government?
I would say actually it's both. And because we don't have a lot of time tonight, you know, we're kind of just doing a surface level, but I mean, my experience with both in Medellin, and I think we're going to talk about memory a little bit when we get to Germany, and across in Colombia in general, and really in both, is that there's cultural memory, right? There is, you know, at one point Medellin had the highest rate of homicides in the world, there is, you know, what I did not show you in the picture of when I was in the Ciudad Consejo in Bogota is that they actually have framed portraits of all the people who've been assassinated while in office hanging in that chamber, right? So there's both a cultural memory, and then there's the memory of the individual memory of this didn't happen, or I tried with this project. So it's both. So the question is, what's the whistleblower protection? There's some, but it's not, I think in practice it's not the same. And that's where you get that people, I mean, have died, you know, and when speaking out. Not all the time, right? And some of that is, there are lots of things that are changing, but I think having it on the law versus what actually happens, they're two different things. So finally, because I want to keep us moving, I'm literally moving on this slide. You saw? So the other thing, so this is with a woman who runs an organization called Funsicar in Cartagena. She was really amazing, and she actually brought her laptop to this beautiful dinner that we had to show me her slide deck and all of the incredible things that they do in Cartagena, who is, again, like I mentioned, they're also members of Open Government Partnership Local, and similarly, they track transparency, public projects. Interestingly enough, it's not this picture, but when I was in Cartagena, I ended up getting some beautiful professional photographs of the meeting I had because their mayor requires that all sort of public meetings need an Instagram story to show transparency. So I got some great photos out of it. This is not that one. That is me with the selfie. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about, I say budgets is participation, but the participatory budgeting concept that Tower Grove South has, some parts of Tower Grove South experience. I know some people in this room have been a part of that. So they do this in a lot of places in Colombia. And I know we talked about, okay, wait, they're tracking public projects, and sometimes they don't get done, but they're also doing all this, you know, participatory budgeting. So a couple interesting things. One, Medellin is known globally as being an expert in participatory budgeting. They actually, through a process, give about 5% of their city's annual budget is where it goes is determined by residents. So that's pretty significant, 5% of their whole annual budget. Bogota does something similar. I don't have a picture of him up here, but I met with a different council member from Bogota, and he's a leader in transparency, and they work with again, I described they have the city, but the borough, sort of like the New York City Council, but they have the different boroughs. And I said, okay, well, you're a leader in this, but anecdotally, does it make a difference? I mean, are people, are there more is there more corruption when there's public participation in budgets? And he said, no, I think there's less. Most of those projects seem to get done without much, you know, without that. I mean, and I think Medellin had some data that says, you know, there's more completion of these projects when they are part of participatory budgeting. And interestingly enough, so Cartagena I would say has a pretty wide range of living conditions. So there are some places in the city that are these beautiful, I mean, what you see in the movies, it's on the coast, it's one of the oldest cities in the Americas that is gorgeous, and there are places in that city that don't have running water. And so what the people requested when they started to do this co-creation process is that we want more technical assistance to submit projects, to submit public projects. And that was one of the things that Carolina, made happen, but that was the people's request. I mean, she probably didn't start in with that saying, okay, we're gonna give the people technical assistance, right? But the people wanted to know how to best submit these public works projects so they could get these things funded. So, and this is, oops, I'm going back. I went back. So I just want to keep this. This is in Cartagena. It's not the prettiest picture, but they were so excited that we came to talk to them that they made us a slide deck, but they made us a whole slide on why we should join OGP Local, which I thought was pretty cool, so I wanted to show you guys. And they are happy to be partners and members, and that's part of the program is building a cohort of cities, not just nationwide, globally, that you can ask questions for anything from transparency to budget to, we'll get to Germany, but I had a meeting with their director of operations because I wanted to talk about trash. So, just what it's like to be a part of a global cohort. So, the last thing I wanted to talk about, and this is a picture of the Paloma de Paz by Botero. You art fans may know Botero is famous for his voluminous sculptures, so all his figures look very round. But this was, he was from Antioquia, which is the department or the state in which Medellin is. And this originally was destroyed in a bombing, and then he created a new sculpture. And that's why I chose this picture. But I think the real thing when I compared Germany to Colombia, what I didn't say at the beginning was that my goal was to go to two very different places to look at the same thing. So my thought was, if government is a reflection of culture, then what do these ideas look like in two very different cultures? And I would say a common theme is that we have we share more things, that we are more alike than we are different. But one of the things that what struck me about Colombia was that I believe in democracy. I believe in the democratic process. I think that there are tools and ways that we could do that better as a city. But there is, seeing and being in a place where there is a sense of urgency to make sure that democracy remains, and building up processes, especially when people both have that institutional memory and that personal memory of maybe the way it was different and a way that they don't want to go back, I think was really struck me. And I think that, frankly, that we should all have a sense of urgency in the things that we could both, we're here at a local town hall, but things that we could be more democratic about here and perhaps nationwide. So obviously this is what President Eisenhower said about differences, but we are about to enter into the Germany portion, so if I can bring up my fabulous co-host and fellow, I will not stop saying that, at least not tonight, Ryan McClure, and then we'll get started about Germany. There's us. That's us.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to share a mic. I just want to say thanks to Ryan. I know, sure, you just came from Jefferson City to hop on and hopped on I-70 to be here. Super glad that you're here. If you want to kick us off about Germany, I can go through.
Yeah. First of all, thank you all for showing up tonight and showing interest in this. This means a lot to us. Also, I want to acknowledge that I did barely anything for this event, and Daniela did it all, so please give her a round of applause again. This is truly such an honor to be part of this program. St. Louis has had such a wonderful, just impressive folks that have been Eisenhower Fellows, and to be part of that is just truly an honor. To get to do it with your alderwoman is pretty cool. I mean, I live in Shaw. I live over on Flora, so I'm a constituent of Daniela's, and we knew each other before this, but we got to know each other a lot better through this program, and got to have a lot of really cool conversations about things that we learned and things that we can work on individually and together to make St. Louis better because of this experience, and make good on the investment that the Eisenhower Fellowship and the donors to Eisenhower, the investment that they made in us and they made in our city. So that's where I would start. Where do I go from here? That's me. Okay. Yeah, I travel a lot too. 8 flights, 6 trains, 32 meetings. I went to Germany. Daniela and I were there together. France, and then Ireland. And a couple other things. I would be remiss, especially because they are here, but my family, my wife Beth, my son Harrison, my daughter Eva. Harrison and Eva are students at St. Margaret's of Scotland, right down the street. Yeah, give it up for SMOS. That's all right. But it's especially when you have young kids. I mean, it is a huge sacrifice to be gone for more than 4 weeks. So I'm super grateful to my lovely wife Beth for really holding down the fort. She did get to come for 2 weeks, but those other 2 weeks she had to hold down the fort. So Daniela, Beth, and I, yes, give it up for Beth. Yeah. And then also for my parents, Rich and Sharon McClure, who held down the fort for the other 2 weeks. Yeah, Eva's clapping for Gammy and Pop-Ups. So you know, a couple of things that I was looking at was like infrastructure and public-private partnerships. So I work for Gateway Arch Park Foundation. We are the philanthropic partner of Gateway Arch National Park and the Conservancy for the park and surrounding areas. So everything that we do is public-private partnerships. That's how we make, you know, the City Arch River project, the transformation around the Arch grounds happened. That's how the Millennium Hotel is happening, which I was in Jefferson City holding with meetings on that. So it's really interesting learning how that happens in Germany and France and Ireland. I don't know, is the infrastructure, what's the next slide? Yeah, so, okay, so I don't think I have to tell you all that throughout America in the 50s and 60s, the interstate, the Eisenhower Interstate Act, which is really ironic, you know, highways were built for economic development. They helped mobility in communities, but they also severed communities from themselves. And we experienced that acutely many areas in St. Louis, but where I work at the Arch, we have an interstate highway that separates the Arch from downtown. Now, we were able to cap that for 1 block, which was transformational, but frankly, we need to do more. So I wanted to look at that in Germany, and really where we started. So the Eisenhower headquarters is in Philadelphia. So that's, Daniela took that picture of me. I'm pointing at what will soon be the park at Penn's Landing. So this is a huge deck over a highway that's being built over I-95, which is one of the busiest interstate highways in America. This is happening everywhere, like across the world and in the country. So it's happening in Philadelphia. It's happening in Seattle, San Francisco, and some of those cities are calling us because of City Arch River and that deck over the highway so that they can do even more transformational projects. So let's brag on St. Louis for a second, because we did something first and they called us, and now we need to catch up with them. But we can do it. We did it first. So you've got the park at Penn's Landing, and then what we have here is, you can't really tell from this picture, but this is on top of a highway. It's in Hamburg, Germany, so Hamburg-Deckel. So this is they've built little farming communities on top of the Autobahn, which is super cool. And here's the opportunity that we've got in St. Louis to do some really interesting things like this. In 15 years, there has to be dramatic interventions on the Poplar Street Bridge and the I-64 double-decker and the elevated lanes that are next to that divide Laclede's Landing and the Convention Center and Washington Avenue. This is an opportunity to really rethink the I-44 corridor in a transformational way for downtown St. Louis that we haven't had this opportunity really for generations, for 60 years. The arch and this highway were built at the same time. So this is inspirational for the things that we might be able to do in building connections from the river to downtown, that I was really grateful to see this. So this is a little more about just the power of the Eisenhower Fellowship and the connections, and I want to thank my friend Kelly Pollock for inspiring me to tell this story. You know, one of the things I did was visit memory sites in Germany and France and cultural sites, and learning more about, you know, World War II and those sites and memory sites surrounding the Holocaust and things like that. So this structure right here is called Maison de Jésus. So that it was an orphanage in the south of France for Jewish children. There was a woman named Sabine Zlatin who housed and hid Jewish children in this orphanage. It looks kind of small, but there are 40 children there. And in the midst of these atrocities that were happening around them, had a relatively good life and were cared for and were taught and educated in this place. Unfortunately, and there were over 100 children that went through and lived at this orphanage. Unfortunately, late in the war, this site was raided. A man named Klaus Barbie with the SS ordered the raid, and those children all perished at Auschwitz. This is a very sad story. Obviously, an atrocity. It's evil. But in the midst of that, you can find little kernels of hope. Over here, if you can't see it, this is Yael, who gave me a tour of Maison de Jésus. She is the granddaughter of a child that was housed at the orphanage and left before the raid and resettled in Belgium. Yael works at this place because she, one, wants to make sure that this story is still told, but also tell the hope that this place facilitated in the midst of evil. So if you go over to this picture, this is Michel Morvan. He is an Eisenhower Fellow based in Lyon, France. And one of the things that the Eisenhower Fellowship does is set up meetings with other Eisenhower Fellows. They do that here in St. Louis, so when we have international fellows that come, they'll meet with folks like Kelly or Vanessa, you know, and hopefully we get to do that now, right? So I was telling Michel this story over lunch the next day, and I was going to Paris after the lunch, and he said, "When is your train?" And I told him when it was, and he said, "Delay it as long as possible. I'm going to take you to the courtroom where Klaus Barbie was tried." Klaus Barbie fled at the conclusion of the war and hid in Bolivia for 40 years. For 40 years, Sabine Zlatin advocated, one, to make that a museum and a memory site, two, to have Klaus Barbie shipped back to France and tried for his crimes. And he was in 1988, and he was convicted in this courtroom, which I wouldn't have gotten to go to if Michelle's wife, Beatrice here, was not an appellate judge in that courtroom. So it's an emotional experience, right? But like that's a moment in my life that will impact me forever. Like all of that I got to do because of this program.
Well, I don't have. Obviously, this photo is not as serious as the last photo, but I did want to touch on. I think what you were getting at was this idea of memory and culture. And I think, you know, Ryan and I were talking about how to best try and share some of these experiences because it is complex. And I'd say memory and culture and experience and your perspective on that and a city's or a government's perspective on that is really layered. So we were talking about how to best try and share our memories about memory. And so what I did want to, and I have it on the next slide, one of the, oops, well, I don't want to go on that one. One of the things that we did, my first meeting with when Ryan and I were in Berlin, I tagged on to one of his meetings. Our very first meeting was at a museum called the Topography of Terror. And I think the name, they were very deliberate about that name. And it sits on what formerly housed the SS and the SA, and basically all the terror apparatus used during Nazi Germany. And, you know, my experience of Berlin in particular was sort of layer on layer of different memories. And I think, you know, in talking to people, back to the question about, you know, democracy is, you know, is it important to remember, you know, where we've been to see where we are, where we're going? You know, in Colombia, they have a saying, you know, record so you don't repeat, right? And so I think this was a theme that came up, I think, for both of us. I do want to hop back to, I just wanted to point out just about, because I know we have the Stuttgart Society here. That is Dr. Friedrich Steffen, I'm probably not pronouncing it right, with a picture of the arch, or not a picture, a model that sits on his desk. And so, perfect, look, I didn't know that. He had that on his desk and he had, oh, well, okay, look, see, you learn all sorts of new things. But he brought out all the trinkets for me that he had kept in his office of St. Louis. And that was not staged. That was literally, as you see, the desk is cut out here with all his papers on it. But I think, you know, part of what I learned is, in particular with Stuttgart, and you'll get to hear from Bob Case, the president of the St. Louis Stuttgart Sister Cities Association, is the deep fondness and connection that Stuttgart has for St. Louis. And I think we've got some people, I want to shout out Tim Nowak, World Trade Center, you know, with our Sister Cities program. But one of the things that I experienced was that, you know, kind of back to memory, you know, St. Louis is one of the first cities to be a sister city with Stuttgart. So our relationship is 65 years old. I think the first sister city was 70 years, and maybe the war was 75 years ago. So that connection it runs deep, and so we have a lot to learn from them, and they have a lot we can learn that they can learn from us. I won't spend too much on it, but I just think the youth council is really cool. This is one of the members of the youth council that I got to meet. They actually, if you notice, that is branded. That is a branded campaign poster that they have. So again, kind of inspiring their youth to really get involved in a way that I think we can learn from. And of course, pretzels. This is about, I want to talk about leadership. I think I'm going to kick it off to Ryan to talk about some of our leadership experiences, and I switched out the photos.
Okay, yeah. So that's Daniela and I at the right before the orientation in Philadelphia. We eventually had to separate, and so they kept putting us together. It's like, no, we can hang out with everybody else. Doesn't have to be all about St. Louis. Sometimes it should be all about St. Louis. But and then we got to do this really awesome tour of the Bundestag, formerly called the Reichstag, where Germany's parliament is housed. This is Beata. Beata has worked at parliament since the late 90s. I mean, basically, I mean, she's been around almost since reunification, and has a really important job there. She's basically, I mean, the chief of staff for the president of parliament, and she's an Eisenhower fellow. So it was really cool to get a tour from her. I mean, and we're walking around and people are like, she won't tell you this, but she's the queen of parliament. And then Elka, who she's to the left of me, is also an Eisenhower fellow, and just really impressive people. And then we got to we got to hang out with the Eisenhower Fellows. They were having their yearly meeting or something in Berlin. And so that's Ilka. And then Benedict, who is awesome. He is he's in the Berlin Senate, so it's like the city council. Benedict's awesome. Again, another Eisenhower fellow, just an impressive guy. And he and I really nerded out over early 90s grunge. Yeah, really broed out over Pearl Jam and Soundgarden. So that was just really great experiences with them.
Yeah, and I think what we wanted to share with you all was that, I mean, for us to be, it was a really amazing moment that I don't know how I feel very fortunate. I mean, Ryan's right. We live, not only is he my constituent, we live on the same block. We took the same flight out to Philly. Thank you, Byron, my partner, for driving us both that morning to the airport. Thank you for being you too. But I think to be able to reflect on, and one of the moments I remember is when and I was looking for the picture, which is I couldn't find it, which is good because we had beer in our hand. But when we were at the bar in Berlin that night, and we were talking about, well, how are we going to take some of these experiences back, and to be honest, I was a little bit overwhelmed with kind of the big picture things, but also, how do we take some of the smaller things back? Are there smaller policy things that we can do? And yes, maybe there are some bigger lessons about democracy to learn, and what an amazing opportunity that I have to bring some of these lessons back. And I remember Ryan kind of re-steered me and gave me a little hope, because I'm like, there's so much. And he's like, but there's so much we can do. And to be able to sit in and to have the space to be away from the city, but also say, hey, like, what can we bring back to our city? What can we bring back to St. Louis? What differences can we make? And how are we going to do that? And how are we going to be shaped by this? And that was a conversation in that moment that shaped me. And it was early on in my trip, so it kind of got me out of the rabbit hole and brought me back up to thinking, more like focused. So I appreciate that about you. All right, so we are going to, if there's anything else you want to add about our trip. All right, so we're going to transition to a panel. We're going to bring up our panelists and our moderator, Rennie Knott. But as we do that, if you all want to take out your phones, this is the interactive portion of the evening. There is a QR code for a survey. Come on. We want to see what you think. I know you think the politicians like to talk and we don't like to listen, so here is your listening portion. We want to see what you think. And then if we can bring on the panelists as we transition to our next, to our community panel. So Bob and Angelica, and then we'll get to see some of the results of this. Okay, so just the question was, are there any other cities who do open government partnership local? And there are only 2 other cities right now in the U.S. that are doing it, and that's Austin and New York. Austin is further along. It's in its 3rd action plan. And they are very happy and eager to partner with whatever St. Louis needs. And then New York City, it's developing its plan. So they haven't put together a plan yet. They're early in the process. So we need official sign-off from our executive branch. And then once we do that, we're a good candidate for OGP. Then once that happens, then we'd start the co-creation process, but you don't have to have an action plan. All we really need is the enthusiastic support of our executive branch. Sure, and then my last question, I'm going to hand it off to our moderator. So I think a few of the benefits are one, learning from other cities. So for example, I didn't get into it, but when I went to Hamburg, which is an OGP local member, their focus has been on digitalization. So all their contracts are digitalized. There's a database. So learning from other places, learning from, what different youth councils are doing, learning what works, and having people to understand and share that. As we're creating things, so we don't just think we know, we actually get the practical experience. With that, I'm going to pass it off to our moderator.
Leave me held in the bag, I guess. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here. I think it's phenomenal that you come up for something like this to learn more about not just our society, not just where St. Louis is, but also where other countries are, where they're going, and how where they're going can help us get there as well. So I want to thank you for that opportunity, and thank you for having me. It means a lot to be out and about and a part of something like this. We have just one microphone, which means I'll be walking around quite a bit, but I want to start with introductions. So I'm going to let you take the mic and then pass it down. Tell me about where you are, who you are, and why you are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Pollock. My day job is CEO of the Burgess Family Foundation here in St. Louis, but I'm up here as a representative of the Eisenhower Fellowship Hub here in St. Louis as I serve as the board chair for our local chapter.
Hello, everybody. I am Angelica Gutierrez. My day job is a senior project manager at Great Rivers Greenway. And in my free time, I serve as representative of the San Luis Colombian Society here in San Luis.
And thank you and welcome everybody here. And I'm Bob Case. I'm president of the St. Louis Stuttgart Sister Cities organization. We're all volunteers. And my day job is I'm an IT project manager at MasterCard.
You know us.
Yeah, great.
Easy enough. Let's start with this question because we're in an interesting time in America, a time where we can really learn from other places who have gone through what we're going through right now. Why do you feel tonight is an important time to get together and have a discussion like this?
I think it's always important to realize that you need to learn from others, right? And you need to learn from other societies. And I was having a conversation with Kelly over coffee earlier, last week. And that the beautiful thing, one of the main things about the Eisenhower Fellowship is the shared humanity, right? So sitting down with people from different cultures and connecting on the things that you do share and the things that you can learn from each other, that is always going to be important. No matter what is going on in the world, and how dire and dark it seems, we always need to make time for that.
So, very similar. Don't steal my thoughts over here. No, and I think the other part that I didn't, there was a lot we were trying to fit into, this presentation. One of the things that struck me was how really, and I said it before, but I genuinely, how much more we have in common than we don't. And so in both you think, well, Germany and Colombia, they're two very different places. Well, both places I learned about infrastructure. I know that first question people were excited about hearing more about mobility. People are trying to figure out how to have more walkable, livable communities in both of these countries. Same thing with housing. We didn't talk about that, but housing is an issue in Europe and it is an issue in Colombia, affordable housing. And some of these larger, I think, social issues, but are really issues about living. How do we want to live? What kind of, rights do we want to have? And how does that show up in, in what we get in the taxes we pay? So I think that it's an important time. And more broadly, certainly I learned things, I think, about democracy from both Germany and Colombia. And if you want to talk to me about my rabbit hole into East Germany, I would love to talk about that.
One of the points you made that really touched me in the beginning, you talked about democracy and about knowing the past and knowing about democracy. As you look at where we are right now as a nation and what's happening, do you wonder about whether or not people fully understand democracy and what it means and how it's constructed and how it's supposed to advance us as a nation?
Yeah, that's a really pertinent question, and certainly for tonight and as we go forward here into our midterm elections, how is that going to turn out, right? But I like the way you put that. See, and I'll give you just a little bit of background about myself. I was born and raised in Germany. And can you hear me better? Okay. And accordingly, I was born after World War II. My father was an American, my mother was German, and he was an Army Air Corps MASH unit person who liberated concentration camps. So talk about democracy and what the Nazis imprinted on Germany and how they put the kibosh on peoples they didn't like, and they did it methodically and through a democratic way. And unfortunately, we see some parallels here today, and I'm not going to go into that because I know we have differing opinions about that. But I am a strong stalwart of democracy, as Daniela puts it out there, and I'm along with her and many other people that I share this belief with, believe that we need to go forward and really put a stake in the ground about our democracy today.
Knowledge is important. Education is important. Knowing how things are supposed to be run is pertinent to us advancing as a country, advancing as a world in general. Got to talk with you. As you look around St. Louis and you think about some of the other stuff that's happening in other places, how much do you find comfort in being in the neighborhoods here? How much do you find comfort in knowing that immigrants are embraced, encouraged, backed financially, backed when it comes to things that are happening well in our world? You know, people are there to give you food, people are there to give you shelter. They're looking out for you. What is the comfort that the immigration community finds here in St. Louis?
Tough question, but okay, first of all, just for some background, as the St. Louis Colombian Society's mission to give, share the Colombian culture, art, through education. For us, education has been the key of success for for our young people. The comfort right now is not there. The current environment is not helping at all. What we try to do is give that comfort to people via cultural festivals, sharing our culture, sharing our food. Hopefully somebody today could share the food that we brought today. Finding comfort is very difficult. In St. Louis, we have a little over 1,700 people from Colombia, according to the latest census. And we cannot reach all of them. It's so hard because they are living life, they are working hard, they are trying to just get a better life here. People like me, professionals, we are trying to do the best that we can here. I'm blessed to have a job that is making St. Louis a better place to live and play, but not everybody has the same luck. So we, through the Colombian Society, try to help as much as we can through scholarships for high school students to go to college, to get educated, to be prepared, and to be successful here in St. Louis.
Thank you very much. We were over here chatting before we began, and the first question I was going to ask her was, what is this whole Eisenhower thing? She told me to ask her that, but then you answered that before I ever got a chance to ask it, so never mind that question. But it's interesting to talk about intersecting cultures, intersecting countries, and bringing it all together in the United States and us understanding other places. Because you look at the interstates and the highways and all of that, that is what was able to bring us together. As you see things right now, do you look at it in a hope and think that, oh yeah, this is going to still happen? Or are you concerned with whether or not these highways, and I use that as kind of a metaphor, are going to continue and we're going to get to our destinations and get to our goals?
Well, I think we've all expressed just concerns for the moment that we're in. I would be lying if I didn't say, yeah, I'm troubled by what I see going on in our country, But what does give me hope is this network, and this network is representative of what it's about community. And this is a global community. We have I think there's about 2,600 Eisenhower Fellows across the globe. There's about 35-ish in St. Louis area. They are change makers for good. I said it's funny that we talk, it's a little bit of a secret society. It's not. Like, there's leaders of 9PBS and the World Trade Center and BioSTL, and you can look around, Integrated Health Network, Regional Arts Commission, like these amazing leaders that are out there. And the whole goal of Eisenhower Fellowships is to make the world more peaceful, more prosperous, and just. And it's a nonpartisan, independent organization. And I thought, being part of it, it's a privilege, but it's also responsibility. And if you think about that, it's a microcosm of what's possible for the world. Because if, here we are under a Republican president, Eisenhower, who saw atrocities and war, but the business community, cross-sector, gave this fellowship as an idea, as a gift to him for his birthday while he was president, with the idea that if we have a network across the globe of leaders across industries, we can change the world. We can solve problems that that boundaries and borders are right now preventing us from doing it. So this is why I stay engaged. It's why, and again, it's a microcosm. We have that in your community in this district, and it's about people, and when people can get around a table to share ideas and express their humanity, then I think it's all possible.
Well said, well said. The quote from Eisenhower that we had up there is very powerful. And if you read it, you need to read it a couple of different times and then emphasize different parts of it, and it really sinks in as you do. So if we ever get that back up there again, I want you guys to read that probably 3 times and read it differently each time, and I think you'll get the point that I'm trying to make here. You're able to travel. You're able to be a part of this, to see other cultures and countries and how they made things happen in their places. As you look back there, do you feel like you learned enough to be a change maker here, or do you think maybe if I had just a little bit more, I'd have something more to bring to the table?
Well, who doesn't want to travel a little bit more? I mean, I think what it did for me, one of the things it did for me is, I think one of the challenges of being a local elected is that you are charged with local issues. So I joked about the potholes and the snow removal, but all that is very important. It is, and that is the bread and butter, and that's, I'm looking at you, why I get elected, but it's also the function of, it also is the function of my role. And as any elected, I think you have to think, okay, well, what are the systems that shape what I do every day? And sometimes it's difficult because you're caught up in, it's with every job, the daily minutia, that you get lost in that and you don't see, okay, well, is there a way to do this differently? Is there a way to make it better? Do people do this everywhere? And we know about St. Louis kind of does what it does. And so I think going abroad and talking to people who, seeing different cities and being asked, I didn't talk about the trash, but in Stuttgart, I met with the director of operations, and I saw solar-powered trash compactors in Hamburg, and it blew my mind. But I was like, there is a different world. Yeah. And we could apply some of these things here. And I wouldn't have been able to do that. I might have been able to read about it, but I wouldn't have been able to feel it, see it, smell it, walk in those places where it is different. So can you ever stop learning? Hopefully not. It changes you, and there's always more to bring back, but I also learned enough to start somewhere.
Yeah. One of the things that, piggybacking on what Daniela said, that so when you start this program, the president of Eisenhower, George DePalma, he says, like, very plainly, basically what we are giving you is time to think. So we have busy jobs that demand a lot of us, and it's very hard to disconnect from that. So not only what George said, but Michael McMillan, who's the president and CEO of the Urban League here in St. Louis, is also an Eisenhower Fellow, and he gave me really good advice before. I was asking all the other fellows, like, how do I be a good fellow? Like, I want to be an A student. And he said, you know, he said, disconnect, like focus on what you're doing. And that space to think will always be like part of what I got a lot of ideas from just that space. But also what it did was it gave opportunities for my team back here in St. Louis to step up and do and lead while I was disconnected, which I think is invaluable. So our management team worked with other partners, and they were able. We were gone during the longest government shutdown in American history. When that happens, that means Gateway Arch National Park closes, the largest tourist attraction in our state. They were able to work with other partners. I just did a couple of phone calls to reopen Gateway Arch National Park for the first time ever in a government shutdown. Our team did that. I did not. So not only was it an opportunity for me to learn and think, but it was an opportunity for our staff and our management team to step up, and that was really cool.
Thank you. I think what's happening down on the riverfront is magical. I think it's city changing. I think it's regional changing, state changing. Because at one time, this was the place to be, west of the Mississippi. And there's a great chance for that to happen again by reinvesting back into who we are and why we are. When you came here tonight, you knew you were going to speak. What is it that you want people to take away most of all from this gathering? I asked Daniela this in an email, and it was about understanding immigration. It's about understanding how to take something from someone else and make it better. In other words, sharing ideas and giving ideas and taking ideas. So as people walk out of here tonight, what is it you want them to walk out with the most?
And I want you, as a group, to understand that the German influence in St. Louis had a great big imprint over the last 150, 200 years, especially with the immigration in the 1840s coming out of dissatisfied Germans in northern Germany who decided to move into the Missouri River Valley. Then they also moved into St. Louis. We had the Civil War, and we had a couple of generals who were Germans on the Union side who helped out significantly. We had Friedrich Hecker, who was a very big proponent of democracy and put his stamp on that in the St. Louis area. But I also want to mention that here we are in South St. Louis, which was a very German area up to relatively recently. I used to live on the south side of Tower Grove Park back in the 1970s, and along Grand Avenue there was German restaurants, German cleaners, German grocery store, German doctors, and you know, on down the line. That has changed. It's morphed. We're into more of a Hispanic and Bosnian and Asian influence, and that's great. And it's all about the immigrants. That's what I want to mention. In particular, we got to have that kind of fresh influence, and we have to push our government to make sure that we don't stop them at the border. If they're legitimate, bring them in, and let's keep this going. And one last thing I want to mention, because Linda Kurtz is sitting over here. She's a member of my organization. Thank you, Linda, for reminding me that this very theater here started out as a German theater about 50 years ago and just showed German movies here. So the Germans are everywhere.
At one time in my life, I drove a German car. It was too expensive, so I don't anymore. But yes, the influences from cultures outside of America are everywhere. But when you really think about it, America wasn't America until all these cultures came here and started to make an imprint and build it up, yes. And in many ways, it'd be great to get back to the comfort of a melting pot again. What you said was eloquent. But I want to ask something now. What is your ask of this crowd?
Empathy. Empathy is the ask. And to make us feel more welcome, it has to come from the heart. It has to come from your empathy, from understanding we are humans. We are not, you know, what other people claims we are. We have many ways that we can be useful for society. We can be educated, we can be uneducated, we can do all types of jobs. So what we need to have in St. Louis, Daniela asked me the question, how can we make you more welcomed? What programs, what things could we do? There are many things in education, in services, in language, in community gatherings, cultural competency. So there are many things that are happening in San Luis. We know for a fact there are organizations that are trying to bring that empathy to everybody. But maybe just all get together and stop the hate that is happening right now.
Thank you. Thank you. I had opportunity before we began to speak with Bob for a while, and you came here in 1960, right? 66, 68. So you saw a lot of the civil rights movement firsthand. So you well know.
In the heart of the Delta country, where all of the turmoil was going on.
So you know that change is possible.
Yes.
You know that coming together is possible. So my question to you is this. Dialogue is how important to making all of this happen, to making all of this presentation we saw come to fruition.
Well, it's critical. I think how we find a way to dialogue with others, especially who have differences from us, is the challenging part. It has to be intentional. It's easy to throw things out there on social media right now, and half of the comments aren't even people. So so having genuine, heartfelt dialogue that pushes you, that challenges you, that makes you think, that's where we solve problems. And so I guess, just piggybacking on some of what others have said, my ask of St. Louis, of our country, of everyone here tonight, is that we find ways to lean into our discomfort, to uncomfortable conversations, because it is really the only path forward to find our shared humanity.
Thank you very much. Please. So I have one last question. It'll be to you, because you asked me to be here, and it's your presentation. So, but I just want to say this one point, is that since January 5th, I've been a part of a nonprofit, Live for Life Gym, and to see firsthand the need, to see firsthand how unadvanced that we think we're more advanced than I guess we are, but it's amazing what a little caring can do. What an opportunity just to sit down with a little boy and girl and talk about where they are, make them feel heard, let them feel important, can change so much. And one attitude bleeds into another attitude, which overall bleeds into our community. So when I talk about making one kid better, it's all about making St. Louis better, because that one kid's going to tell another kid, and as the commercial said, and so forth and so on and so on. As you leave here tonight, and you've been able to hear from the speakers, you've been eloquent in your speech, you've heard people ask questions. When you leave here tonight, obviously this won't be the last time you have this. Would you like to have more questions come your way? Would you like to have people reach out to you to get more understanding of how they can help better the immigration situation in the city of St. Louis?
Good questions. Can you beat all my town halls? Can we do this? Can we do this more often? No, that is something that's been on my mind and, frankly, on my heart. So I think one takeaway, for you all is that's why we did the survey for data. What do you want to learn more about? What can I don't want these learnings to just stay in my head. I do want to share them. And so what are the topics that you want to hear about? I saw infrastructure. I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to you all for being here, and that's the next portion. But I think particularly with Latinos and what is being done right now, I think finding ways to build community. That's why we had food tonight. That's why we had a bar open, because part of you can talk about fascism, you can talk about all the systems. At the end of the day, building community makes us healthier, it makes us safer, it makes for better governments. It's kind of where everything starts. We are the people are where it's where everything starts. So I think concretely letting me know what kind of topics you want to hear about, how you want to engage, if you'd like to be a member of OGP Local and who to send an email to in the city, and then other things you'd like to learn about so we can craft more programming. And also if you'd like Rennie here at another event.
Thank you very much. I hope that you all were able to learn something, to take something away, get some questions answered, or at least open your mind up to something else. And to be in all honesty with you, it's okay if someone has a different opinion, a different voice, a different way they view the world. But it's most important to have a little bit of a dialogue with each other, to get a better understanding of why they are the way they are, and why you are the way you are, and how we all can come together. Because as big as this earth is, there ain't nowhere else for us to go. We're all here together. We're going to be here together for as long as we're here. So get used to it. Get along with one another. Daniela, thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this. Just to listen to you guys and where you've been and what you've taken away from it is phenomenal. Most of my life was spent taking Route 66 from Los Angeles, California to Springfield, Ohio. And so that was how I learned about America and the world, with just seeing people firsthand. So I know what it's like to travel to other places and absorb that. And thank you for bringing that back to us. The microphone is yours. It is your night. Thank you again.
It's hard to follow. I just want to say a list of thank yous. That's why I have my sheet over here. One, thank you to you all for taking time out of your evening to be here. I want to just say thank you to our incredible partners, Kelly Pollock and the St. Louis Eisenhower Fellows. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all the fellows in the audience. Thank you to Angelica and the St. Louis Colombian Society for being here as well and supporting this. Thank you to Bob Case and St. Louis Stuttgart Sister Cities Organization for being here. A special shout out to Laura and Casey Bunch of Wild Carrot who donated the space for free tonight. And I said maybe I want to have a little talk, and then it ended up being this, so thank you to them. Also to Rakita Henderson of Pinnix Photos over there. So if you need an excellent photographer, she's there, and she's also in the neighborhood. Also, thank you to STL TV for, again, crazy idea, bring some people together, can you film it? They work tirelessly for the community, and that's how we actually stay open and transparent, by having videographers available to film public meetings like this, for this and every committee meeting. Also, a special shout out to, thank you to Ryan for being here, for all our travels together. A special thank you to all the volunteers who kept me on task tonight. So thank you to April, Kelly, Deva, Mindy, and our intern, Madeline. You can give a round of applause for them. And finally, in the pursuit of peace and justice and dialogue, we'll be milling about for questions, and there's some food, so please take your time leaving here tonight, and make sure you tip your bartender. That's it. Thank you.